republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we get to formal business, regular agenda, we're going to have swear in Mr. Pinto as the Vice President of the Board. Welcome back, Mr. Pinto. You will miss by the time you're away, but we're surely glad you're back safely.
Thank you.
So we ready, Mr. Owen? Okay.
Mr. Pinto, please come forward. I think it uses the interview.
I, Sam Pinto, being duly sworn to oath and say as follows. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Vice President of the Board of Education according to the best of my ability.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Pinto. Thank you, Mr. Owen. Okay, since our auditor is, I guess, in transit, she might be delayed because of the weather. We're going to proceed with the agenda and get back to her when she does come. I just want to open the remarks by saying a group of us visited the summer schools in progress at both the Lindell, which has the middle and high school programs, summer school programs, and Adida, which has our extended year program for special ed kids. And both seem to be up and running, so we're grateful for that. I'll turn this over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Not much of a report tonight, just to reiterate what you said, summer school programs up and running. Lots happening across the district, planning for a new school year, looking at data from last year. We sent it home to the board on Friday our Regions data in comparison to the county, and I'm happy to say that in all the two Regions exams, we were either right at or above the county average, which, for a district that serves the number of students in poverty, I think is a fairly significant statistic for us. So we have great plans for the future, great plans for next year, and we're not wishing this number away.
Dr. Ryan, may I say something?
Please do.
So I just,
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say, it's always, we know that we live in a wonderful community in Long Beach. But one of our alumni, Will Scudden, actually brought Andrew Cotton, Cody, as he's known to the surfers world, and they just came in third place in a world surfers competition down in Portugal, in Navarre, on a 100-foot wave show. But what was really wonderful is that Will Scudden brought him to our community to help inspire our students, our children, during the surfing program. And I just think that's such a shining example of the care that many of our community members have. So I wanted to give him a big shout out. So thank you, Dr. Ryan.
Thank you. Any other board comments?
Yeah, I was in the second session.
Okay, we right along to the organization comments. Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda only. Visitors report for May 2023. No action needed. Okay, may I have approval of minutes for executive session and reorg and regular meeting of July 5th, 2023, and executive session and special meeting of July 11th, 2023. I'll make a motion. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? No discussion. All right, we'll put it to a vote. Ms. Dulce?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, presentations for the superintendent.
I ask the board to consider item 1, certificate of personnel.
You have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Dulce?
Yes.
Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Pinto?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
And I'd like to welcome and congratulate Ben Swan of the famous Swan family. Doing high school, and Emily Siegel, who is here, she'll be a record. Item number 2, non-certificate of personnel.
You have a motion?
Motion. Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Dulce?
Yes.
Ms. Pace?
Yes, and welcome.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Pinto?
Yes.
I vote yes.
And I'd like to introduce Teresa Stavola, who will be joining our business office as the mayor.
You know, it's funny when you sit up here and you see strange faces, you say, uh-oh. People have complaints that come into the board meeting. I'm glad to hear for good occasion, so welcome.
Item number 3A, be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the student residency appeal for the student named in confidential attachment A. And for B, be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the student residency appeal for the student named in confidential attachment B.
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Yeah, I just want to make a point that I just sort of applaud attendance in the district for looking out for the good welfare of the district. You know, if in fact students are here who really do not reside here, and taxpayers shouldn't be supporting them and paying their education expenses. So I thank the district, I thank Registration of People Services for keeping an eye out in terms of those who are good and loyal taxpayers in town and certainly deserving of the education here, and those who might be trespassing and trying to come in. So I think it's a good effort on the part of the district to maintain good and welfare for the entire district. So the vote on that resolution, Ms. Belsey,
Yes.
Ms. Pace,
Yes.
Ms. Conway,
Yes.
Mr. Pinto,
Yes.
I vote yes.
Item number 4 is an approval of an emergency expenditure. I'm going to ask the board to approve it as amended. The amendment is up to not to exceed $230,000. And as you know, this is because we had a failure in our HVAC system in our high school this week. This will provide a temporary chiller to tide us over until the replacement happens.
Okay, may I have a motion?
Motion.
I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yes, I just want to thank you, where's Mr. DeVito? He moved?
He's out here.
You know, you really had quite a couple of things happen here, and you always handled everything with such a level head, and you're always thinking things throughly to make sure that our buildings are running efficiently. So I want to thank you very much, and please tell Mr. Kramer our thanks as well.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
I agree, and you took the words right out of it. You got to the mic faster than I could. I really appreciate it, and this is super important, so thank you for all your hard work. And thank everyone that helped as well.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have a vote on that expenditure as amended. Ms. Belsey,
Yes.
Ms. Pace,
Yes.
Ms. Conway,
Yes,
Ms. Pinto,
Yes.
I vote yes.
And ask the board to consider items 5 through 9.
May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
so I just have a question. I know the construction happens, we have to wait a long time, but forgive me, but what is this construction for again, Mr. DeVito? And for the plumbing?
Sure,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
so what we're awarding tonight, and item number 5, is the work that we're going to be doing that was approved in part of last year's budget, right? That was approved by the state, that now we're able to go out to bid because we got the permits from the state education department. And that's going to be for the work at the middle school in terms of the steam to hot water conversion.
Oh, okay.
That's like the bulk of the work and the new boilers that we expect to get.
Okay. I do have another question, Dr. Ryan, is that
Please.
okay?
Yes.
For number 7, it's for the piggyback agreement. It was for some pickleball courts, and I've noticed that we put pickleball courts at the high school. Do we have any plans to maybe paint some more pickleball courts, say at West School? Or
Well, you know,
Lindell?
it's a good question. I don't know if we have the space. At West School, I know one of the things that we're trying to do at West Entities as part of the proposal for the new bond issue is to really revamp those playgrounds. I don't know if pickleball is really something that's being considered. We're looking at something more like a Gaga pit, especially at West School because of that age group. And I think between what we have at the middle school and what we have at the high school for pickleball, because of how we're doubling up with the tennis courts, I think at this point that may be sufficient,
Okay.
because I don't know if I necessarily think it's a good idea to take away from the play spaces for the younger children in those two schools. Especially even after school hours, I know a lot of the community likes to play in those areas, and I think we're trying to gear it more towards the elementary age.
Yeah, I had asked because I knew that some of the young kids were actually showing an interest in pickleball, but I
But we
think
can
it's
certainly
right.
look at it, we can certainly consider it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion?
I'd just like to point out, I know Doc, you noticed this, we appreciate getting the other bids on the awards besides just the winning bid. It helps us give us perspective, and it also improves our transparency with the public.
I just had one other comment, and that's concerning the Twilight program. If Dr. Gallagher would be so kind, maybe to send some information home about, I guess that was sort of instituted towards the end of the last school year. So my question is, do we need a certain quota, a certain number of students to run that program? If we don't have a certain number of students, do we still run it? And how do we basically, make that determination?
I can certainly send that home. Dr., you want me to speak to it a little now, or?
If you would.
Sure, so we did run the program as a pilot this year, beginning, I believe in late February. And it was very successful in getting some students who, for a variety of reasons, were in danger of not graduating to be able to do so. As a result of that pilot, we evaluated what we had put in place, and we actually put together a screening process by which students would be recommended for the program. I believe actually we have 22 students who will be starting that program in September. Students who are deficient in credit, students who have school boards and sometimes really find it difficult to come to school. And there's a pretty strict process by which we will look at whether students are being successful there, or whether additional students start to meet with failure and will benefit from such a program. So I think it's a really good way to kind of deal with the changing needs of some of our students, especially as many of them face mental health crises.
So as far as middle school students who are coming into grade 9,
No, before 11 and 12.
just from 11 to 12. So just for those students, in terms of, since it says here that it starts on September 1st, how is the net put out? You have 23 that already are established or basically identified at the start, so how do we identify others who might be in need prior to the
So
beginning?
the guidance counselors would have to initiate the referral. There's a committee that will evaluate the referrals that guidance counselors put forth according to certain criteria. And if people want to suggest, the teacher, for example, wanted to suggest a student, they would suggest to the student's guidance counselor or the parent. The counselor would be responsible for making the referral. Then there's a committee, high school administration teams, and guidance, some staff who would be responsible for recruiting and
Any other discussion?
I just have one question, on that, what are the hours for? Well,
3 to 5, I believe. I might be a little up on the 5, it might be 5:30 or 6.
Okay, I'm sort of remiss, I want to say hello to Mrs. Swan, and I kind of miss seeing you over from middle school, but I do see your murals every time I walk those halls, so it's nice to see you.
I really miss it a lot as well.
Welcome home.
Thank you, thanks so much.
Okay, maybe take a vote on that, any other discussion? No? Okay, Ms. Delsey,
yes.
Ms. Pace,
Yes.
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Mr. Pinto,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
Item 10 is the adoption of the amended policy on APs, and I just wanted to note to the board that we are doing extensive training of many additional staff members in these APs over the summer, and I thank Mr. Epstein and Mr. Kramer and Mr. Anfasi for next year.
This policy, do we,
Can I just ask a quick question about that, Dr. Gallagher? Just a quick question. I know we talked about also CPR trainings. Is that something that is going to be happening as well?
Yeah, it's one of the same.
It's the same thing? Yeah. Okay, it's the same. Okay, thanks.
any other discussion? Okay, need a second?
Second.
Okay, we already had discussion, so Ms. Delsey,
Yes.
Ms. Pace,
Yes.
Ms. Conley,
Yes.
Pinto,
Yes.
and I vote yes.
And I guess we're just consider items 11 through 13. Motion?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Kelsey?
Yes.
Please.
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ms. Pinto?
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, now we're gonna go back to, for those of you who are here at the appointment, you might want to exit now, otherwise you'll be trapped. But, congratulations, and we look forward to seeing you in September. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Forgot your jacket, Teresa.
Thank you.
Was glad you arrived safely this summer. Sorry for the rain. Everybody had one.
Wait, yeah, this is.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Thank you to the Board of Education. I apologize that I'm late this
No,
evening.
glad
A
you
little bit of a
did.
storm.
Yes.
So I'm going to walk through the Board of Ed presentation, and what I'd like to do is start right behind the table of contents to talk about the audit objectives, if I could.
Sure.
So our objectives are to express an opinion about the financial statements. And has everyone had a chance to have the presentation materials reviewed?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay. So we're going to express an opinion, and that's in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. We're going to also report on the internal control over financial reporting and compliance with laws and regulations and provisions of contracts. And that's because this is an audit in accordance with government auditing standards, because the school district expends at least $100,000 in federal funds. We're also, because the state education department tells us this, we're also to render an opinion on the cash basis financial statements of the extra classroom activity funds. So we remember that these are controlled by an extra classroom activity fund treasurer, various student advisors in conjunction with students. Nevertheless, the state education department views this as the responsibility of the auditor on behalf of the Board of Education. And there's about $88,000, $90,000 of funds that flow through these accounts during the previous year. The district receives in excess of $750,000 in federal funding, and so they are required to have what's known as a federal single audit. During the previous year, fiscal 22, the district expended $5.8 million. And as you remember, there was a lot of COVID funding that had been passed on to the school district. We, in March, released our federal single audit report. We audited major programs which consisted of the adult education and the ESF funding, which is the COVID money. And basically what happened is we rendered an opinion that showed that we had no findings or questioned costs. So I hope you noted that when you read that report. So the audit engagement. As the Board of Education knows, you have two other auditors that are responsible to the Board of Education. You have an internal claims auditor who reviews every transaction within rise to a disbursement. And then you also have an internal auditor who, with the Board of Education, assesses the risk over the internal control structure and identifies an area to be audited or several areas to be audited on a periodic basis. So ours is an audit to determine whether or not the financial statements are fairly presented. And so we're going to look at reasonable rather than absolute assurance. We're not looking at every claim. We're looking at assurance on the internal control structure as it relates to giving opinion on financial statements. And so if there's a deficiency in the internal control, which there has not been in the past, that would lead us to feel that we can't render an opinion on an aspect of the financial transactions, then that would be qualified within the auditor's report. We have never had a qualification. The audit is not designed to detect immaterial errors or frauds, and we use a test basis. There's different tables according to the professional standards that we use to depending upon what account transactions we're going to audit. We look at materiality, and this is also according to the standards. And as I mentioned before, we're not performing a detailed examination of all transactions because that's not our role. These three professional standards have not changed. So it's generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and the Single Audit Act, and the uniform guidance. My responsibility, since I work for the Board of Education, is to communicate with the Board of Education. If there is something that takes place during the audit process that I feel that I need to reach out to the board on, this would be a material weakness or significant deficiency of a high level. I've never had to do that. My responsibility is to communicate to the board. And maintaining independence and exercising due professional care. This comes from rotating the staff that are involved in the audit engagement and also interviewing the personnel of the school district to determine what they do as it relates to the financial statement audit. So I'm not going to go through this whole page, but we are auditing the financial records of the school district, and as you can appreciate, so the responsibilities really are for the school district to maintain a good set of financial records. The school district does do this. Apply the appropriate accounting policies, the school district does this. Maintaining effective internal control structure, the school district does this. In the course of our audit, we ask a lot of questions of various personnel about what they do. And we do that so that we can map out the internal control structure to make sure that there are checks and balances in place. And we perform those interviews, and the information that we received and that we've mapped out shows us that there is a good internal control structure in place again this year. So what do we do? How do we go about the audit? So this first page really talks about an assessment of risk. So before we actually dive into the numbers and see whether or not they represent the condition of the school district, we have to assess the risk that something could be materially misstated, okay, or that there could be a misappropriation as it relates to the financial statements. And so as I started to mention, we start with understanding what the internal control structure is. Interview the district personnel, and this is across all of the financial cycles: purchasing, disbursements, revenues and receivables, the federal single audit, grants, and then we'll map out that internal control structure, and we'll see whether or not there's segregation of duties. So those are checks and balances over the financial transactions, independent individuals applying processes. If there can't be segregation of duties, if there's a mitigated control, which means someone after the fact, and of course if their job is reviewing whatever the aspects are of someone else's responsibilities. We'll go ahead and we'll review the internal auditors' reports and the findings, review the internal claims auditors' reports and findings, if any kind of communications from the state education department or the office of the state controller. We request that information from the school district so that we can see whether or not it impacts the financial statement audit. Review the minutes of the Board of Education. I've reviewed all the minutes up through June so far, and look at the information that's extracted from the minutes to see what should be in the financial records. So for example, this commentary in the board minutes about certain memorandums of agreement being ratified, to the extent that they impact the financial information for the school district, I'll test that. This information regarding transfers, I'll test that. This information regarding funding of the reserves, the district board went ahead and they passed a resolution in June. I will look at those amounts to see whether or not that's what's been funded. Information regarding capital project adjustments, whether they're contract adjustments or emergency work that's been performed during the year. I'll look at that also. We do reach out to the internal auditor and the internal claims auditor on an interview process to see whether or not in the course of what they're doing, there's anything material to our financial statement audit. We'll go ahead and perform preliminary analytical review. These numbers compare tests to the last year and also compare to the budget. So identify those variances that would lead us to want to audit something more in depth. And then we'll assess those significant risks of material misstatement. So the areas that you obviously and we obviously are looking at from a control evaluation and testing standpoint that we're all interested in is payroll is the largest part of the budget, payroll and benefits. So we do a lot of audit work in this area. So we've mapped out the various payroll control cycles. We've done different areas of testing. We've culled a sample from the total population of payroll transactions. And we've gone ahead and we've audited various attributes. We've looked at overtime. We've looked at extra time. We've looked at contract pay rollover. We will look at administrative salaries. We have not done that yet. We'll look at new hires. We'll look at termination to make sure that the calculation of payouts is correct. So there's various different areas within the payroll that we look at. The next biggest area is purchasing and cash disbursements. As you would expect, you have an internal claims auditor. So we still cull a sample of transactions from the population to make sure that they're representative of being charged to the correct appropriation of budget code and that they relate to transactions within the current audit period. We're going to look at receivables and collections to make sure that the timing of those is correct and we've captured all of those amounts that are due to the district services provided. We audit extra classroom activities, the fundraising, cash receipts and cash disbursements, and so we've culled a sample from the total population and we've looked at that. We reached out to your predecessor, Director of Information Technology, to assess the information system as it relates to the financial accounting information and as it relates to some of the information that's available for third parties, such as the fixed asset management piece, which is done through AssetMax, and the piece that has to do with any kind of liability reporting. We've looked at the bank reconciliation process, and we've looked at wire transfers and cash receipts in the log and such. So we've done a lot of work in the bank reconciliation area. We've pulled a sample of journal entries, and we've tested those for appropriateness, approval, and then the supporting documentation, and all those look good. And we've pulled a sample of budget transfers also from the total population, and those are all good too, as far as what we audited. So we're doing that to see whether or not we can rely on the internal control structure, which really gives rise to the numbers that are going to be in the books and records. And so after that process takes place, then we develop the audit program, because we've identified those areas that we need to audit and the various levels of depth that we need to do that with. And so again, the areas that we're looking at, payroll and related liabilities, I'm sorry, I should have advanced this. Okay, I'm sorry. Payroll and related liabilities, as I said before, revenue recognition, restricted reserve activity, so this is either by budget or board authorization. Any federal and state grant expenditures and revenues, so we're looking for compliance, obviously. There's a budget that's filed and then there's a spending pattern that takes place, the supporting documentation for the spending, and then there's reporting that's due on a number of grants. So we'll take a look at that. Capital project expenditures, so the district has some bond funding that they spend down. We'll look at that. We'll look at any transfers. You have a capital reserve, and so we'll cull through a sample of those transactions to make sure that those are appropriately reported in the books and records. I mentioned the capital asset inventory report, so it's a third-party system that's used. Information that's maintained in the general ledger is communicated to that third party, and the depreciation charge for the year is calculated. Long-term liabilities, so we remember there's two types of financial statements. We might remember this from those of us who have reviewed the financial statements in the past. There's those that are the modified accrual basis, which is the way the district keeps their books and records, and it's only liabilities that are paid with current resources. And then there's the accrual basis financial statements, as statement of net position and as statement of activities, which has every liability, whether it's due next year or it's due 30, 40, 50 years from now. And so this is where we know that the district is funding for these liabilities appropriately on an ongoing basis, but the standards want us to capture from a financial reporting standpoint anything that the district has responsibility to pay or retire at some point in the future. So there's a list up here of long-term liabilities, and the OPEB has to do with post-employment benefits, such as retirees' health insurance, which is contractually or agreed upon. We know that there's a bond schedule. We know that there's some leasing in place, because last year was the first year that FASB 87 was applied, where we had to capture long-term lease agreements. And we know that there's information from the retirement systems, both the teachers and the employees in locals retirement system, that's reported on this financial statement that's based on actual evaluations. So this is all the substantive information that we're gathering from third parties and from the district's books and records in order to create the financial statement document. So once we're done performing the substantive testing, then we can go ahead and start to prepare or draft the financial statements and the disclosures. And that's done somewhat simultaneously as we finish up the audit process. And as you remember, there is a separate, in addition to the financial statement, there's a separate communication to those charged with governance. It's an AUC 260 communication. And this is the letter that talks about significant accounting policies if we've had any difficulties in performing the audit. And attached to that letter are journal entries that we propose. And I've talked about in the past that there's not a lot of journal entries. The district does a really good job of maintaining the books and records. And the other thing is I've also communicated that those adjusting journal entries that we propose, the district does report in their books and records, and it is reflected in the ST3, which is what they file with the state. So the two sets of documents agree with each other. We had a management letter last year, a few comments, and the district is really good at discharging or taking care and remediating whatever comments we may bring to their attention and to the board's attention as a result of the review of the internal control process. And we have not had significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, and these are real breaks in the internal control structure that leads toward a defalcation or a misstatement of the financial statements. But if we did, then we're required to communicate those two separately. So once I come and I meet with you with the reports and draft, and you agree that they're representative of the school district's financial statements, then what we will do is we will go ahead and file the reports with the Office of the State Controller, and the district will file their reports with the State Education Department. And as a reminder, the federal single audit is due March of the following year. It's a lot of compliance work, so we typically do not perform that aspect of the audit until sometime during the latter part of the year or the first quarter of the following year. Any questions on that so far? Yes, Dr. Ryan.
I'm glad you asked. I just have two questions. One is, am I correct in assuming that your involvement in the district is 2 substantive weeks, and then all the time that's involved in terms of looking at, I guess, the computer screen in terms of statements and all?
So that's correct. So there's 1 week, which is really the audit planning week,
Right.
audits assess the risk in the field.
Right.
There's 1 week to perform the substantive work, and there's many, many days, weeks in between as we continue to gather information through our portal and reach out to the third-party preparers for the actuarial information themselves.
Now, we've been waiting. We're in the process of being audited by the state in terms of that annual or biennial or whatever it is, triennial process. And it's been a little bit long in terms of waiting, but there was sort of extraneous circumstances in terms of sickness of the New York State people, and that kind of delayed the process. And I guess everything's related to COVID, I guess, whether it is or it isn't. But my question there is related to the relationship between your work and the state audit. So your report basically comes to the board in March in terms of,
For the federal
Yes.
single audit, yes.
so,
Not the regular.
Regular audit comes in October,
right.
sometimes November 15th, if
Right.
we're still waiting for information, yes.
So am I correct in assuming that if in fact the state finds something in terms of whatever they're, I guess, they're doing pretty much what you're doing on a pretty much different kind of level.
I'm not sure what the scope of their work
Yes.
is. 'Cause I haven't seen it.
But you would identify those problems in terms of that, in terms of the state? Am I correct with that, Mr. DeVito, or are they two separate, works?
Maybe not, because.
They're really two separate.
It's just.
Yeah,
yeah.
I need to clarify
Yeah.
that too.
I think,
My purpose is
Go ahead.
really to render an opinion on the financial statements and talk about whether
Right.
or not they're fairly stated. This Office of the State Controller performs a risk assessment and then picks an area. And if you have an area that has nothing to do with the financial statement, okay, I'm not sure.
Right.
It's been various different types of specific areas audited by school districts
Yeah.
recently.
But would your work basically give us a heads up in terms of future audits, in terms of what we should be mindful of?
If I find something in the course of my audit, that's what I communicate to you in the
Yes.
management letter. But I'm not responsible for the internal control structure audit. That's really something that if you feel there's an area that you wanted to look at more
Yes.
closely,
Yeah.
that would be something that your internal
Yes.
auditor would say to you, maybe focus on this particular year.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sorry, Michael.
No, I was just gonna add that I think what the controls office looks at two things. Not only does it look at some of the internal controls that are risk order that helps us prevent any type of a finding that the controls office would say there's a weakness there, but I think it also looks at somewhat of the policy of planning in terms of, I know one of the questions that they had was, how are we doing with variances? Like how tightly are we budgeting on different items and does it match with expenditures? I think they're looking more macro in terms of what is the impact of what the district is doing vis-a-vis the community in terms of that, where I think the external auditor is really just looking at our financial statements to see if they're accurately representing what's actually happening on an annual basis. So there may be some crossover, but it's really distinct. I see it differently. Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, Newsday, I guess whenever they don't have anything to write about, they look to the schools. They did the front page article on reserve funds, which always seems to be a topic of interest with the state. They have nothing else to write about. So, thank you.
And unfortunately, the information that was captured was really not correct. John Hildebrand is great, he's been around for a while, but there's various people that report with him that don't necessarily have the same skill set. And so when they talked about accumulation of funds, you need to carve out also, like they talked about reserves, and there's a table there, you need to carve out the appropriated fund balance, because that's already committed. And I look at a district like yours, where you have a big commitment to reduce the levy so that you can support the services that you're delivering. And that was nowhere apparent from that whole article. Okay, so that was just my commentary, I'm sorry.
I appreciate that, thank you.
So I wanted to talk about the phases, and you're well aware of this, so because you just asked the question, which was a really on-point question about, how long we're here and what else we do when we're not here. So we do segregate these weeks to be on site. So because we're asking for a tremendous amount of information, it's a multi-page document request that we send to the school district, and I'm sure it's very time consuming to gather everything. I really appreciate the timeliness of it becoming available. So once we get that information, we came to League of April 24th, and we did the preliminary testing, looking at the internal control structure, assessing the risk, and we were able to now go ahead and frame out what the audit program is going to look like, so that when we come back on September 8th, we actually know what our plan of work is going to be. I have scheduled, providing that we get all the information, to come back and meet with you on the report to draft in October. And I talked already about the timetable for the federal signal bond. So the staffing, one of the ways that we look at independence is to rotate staff. And sometimes, it's painful for the district because the staff don't necessarily have the same relationship, my staff with district staff, but that's a good thing too, okay? Because, no one wants to be comfortable. That's not, it's not good to be comfortable. So the supervisors, Nicole Andersoni, has many years of experience with the firm, and Jesse Dillon has multiple years of experience, both in government and in not-for-profit auditing. So those are my two staff people who are integral to the team. And so there's one new accounting standard that I will assess with Mr. DeVito and his staff, and we've talked about this already. We've had multiple conversations during the year. So we remember last year was implementation of GASB 87. I have a lease. The lease goes for at least 12 months. I need to identify the dollar value of that lease because I have a right to use something for a period of time. And I need to report both that asset. Once I look at the discounted interest rate that's built into that contract with whoever the vendor is, I need to show that as a right to use asset. We amortize it over its life. And we also need to show the liability because every time I make a payment, a portion of that liability has built-in interest. So that was 87. And so now the standards, the Government Accounting Standards Board said, okay, leasing of equipment and such was not enough. We need to now look at subscription-based information technology arrangements. So this is software that's used by any local government that you have a right to use for more than 12 months. And it's the same exercise. So the exercise is, for example, I use Finance Manager, okay? And I have a right to use finance. I'll just take on that accounting software. And I have the right to use that. Maybe it's a 3-year contract, maybe it's with BOCES. It's not more than 12 months. I haven't looked at this yet. If it's more than 12 months and it's a multi-year agreement, So bless you. Then the analysis is how much are the payments prospectively until the end of the lease, until the end of the subscription-based agreement. If I have a right to renew, I need to add that on also, okay? And then I need to figure out that built-in interest rate. And then I go ahead and break out those payments that the district's made on a recurring basis, whether it's monthly, quarterly, or annually, into the principal and interest. And I go ahead and discount that and place that as a right to use subscription-based agreement on my financial statement, and I amortize that also on the line of the usefulness of that. And so it's very much like ASB 87. The difference being is that there probably will not be a lot of situations where this will apply, because what we've seen so far is that there are a lot of arrangements with BOCES, which are annual contracts and cancelable by a school district. There may be some other things out there that on a subscription-based arrangement that we will have to evaluate, but Mr. Tavio and myself and Debbie, the accountant, will look at those things and see whether or not there's anything that needs to be captured. This is also just for the accrual base, well, it's not just the accrual basis, it's for the fund financial statement, but it's also for the accrual basis financial statement to show that long-term liability piece. That's really the thrust of this whole thing.
Yeah, so this is, I don't understand for the subscriptions, with IT subscriptions, are you talking about, say, the district has a subscription with, say, Google or with
Microsoft Office or something like that, any platform.
any platform?
Any platform that I have the right to use something for a period of time that's 12 months or better, I have to assess whether or not that arrangement is material. I have to calculate what the total payment stream is. I have to apply that discount rate, built-in discount rate, if there's no rate identified in the arrangement. There are tables that we use based upon the district's creditworthiness. Okay, there's interest rates that apply. And then we look at whether or not it needs to be, the liability needs to be captured, and also that right to use asset, because I have something, it's a value.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you again, thanks for coming out, Ray. Yeah.
Thank you, I'm sorry it's late again.
I just want to remind the board members, each of us has a statement that we must return to Colin Wadowski. We did it every year, so conflict of interest or whatever, make sure we get it back. Great.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, each of us received from Colin Wadowski a statement asking us if there's any conflict of interest between us and anybody that does business with the district. We're supposed to sign that and return it to them. It's all part of the audit. So if you haven't received it, you can speak to Mrs. Stone. Okay. All right, moving right along. Board of Ed, any additional to our old business?
Well, I have a quick question.
Sure.
We haven't heard about our food services in a while, and I know I'm just kind of springing this out, but I was like, springing it out of nowhere. But I know that we discussed the farm to table initiative a while ago, so I know that in July and August, we tend to start thinking about what we want to order for next year and how we can make our food service even better than the year before. So I'm just kind of wondering, what ideas do we have for next year?
So Mr. DeVito, I think you walked Ms. Andrews out, but Ms. Conway is asking if we've started planning our food services, menus.
Sure. Yeah, well, we certainly started talking about it, and we're going to continue with the Farm to School initiative. We made some progress this past year in introducing some new items, some locally produced items, collaborating with some of the organizations that are in this Farm to School movement. Also, we joined the cooperative, so it's a Long Island cooperative for purchasing. You may have wondered why you didn't see. Usually it's this meeting when we put on the big food services bid awards, and we didn't do that because we're participating in the cooperative this year. So we're getting access to some different products that we're definitely going to test out to our students and see, how they like it. In terms of any major overhauls, I don't really see anything major. What we'll continue to do is just look for products that maybe, for example, we have our popular products. Let's just say, for example, a taco. that we may see, well, maybe there's a different shell that the kids like better, or maybe some of the beef or whatever it is that we use in the taco, we'll keep testing, which is what we've been doing, to see if it's better received. We're going to continue with those meetings that we have with the middle school and the high school students to get feedback from them on, the program itself. And I think part of it, and I know we've experienced this past year, that when they got to really talk about it, see it, taste it, go into the kitchens, and really learn about it, they seem to like it better. Like it wasn't as foreign to them. So we hope to do more of that. We were doing stuff with the home ec classrooms, again, getting them to try to make the things that we do in the kitchens, and then it would become something more familiar to them. So we're really going to continue with our strategies that I just outlined, but with some of the new products, we'll test it. I don't have anything to say like, a smoothie bar or, something that, or something of that, but we are looking to revamp the cafeteria as part of Central Bond issue. So when we do the revamping of the high school cafeteria, we're going to look to see what we can do in terms of maybe a community bar. That's not for this year. That would be for something in the future.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I look forward to hearing more about the cooperative.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. DeVito, if you need a school board taste tester, you got me.
Anybody else? Questions or comments from the public on Reach Classroom Teachers Association? Ms. Bloom? Nothing. Administrative Supervisor, LBSCA?
Yes, I'd like to thank Dr. Gallagher, Dr. Natale, Mr. DeVito, Mr. Halls for the time that you guys took out of your busy schedule to meet with us as a new board, and we really appreciate the time you took so far with us. Thank you.
We appreciate you coming to the meeting. Thank you for giving your time. Parent Teacher Association? Just before we adjourn, I just want to thank you, Mr. Spinner, for coming faithfully every school board meeting. And I have other things you'd rather do, but thank you for setting us up and staying here. We have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't see it.